Gribble, and I'm the founder and chief strategist at VSG Hospitality. We're a boutique marketing agency working solely with hotels and restaurants and F&B brands. We've got around 15 years experience both here in the UK and the Middle East. If everybody can hear me okay, if you can just please perhaps just say hi in the chat, let me know if there's any issues. And of course, as we move through this, hey Rhiannon, how are you doing? And of course, as we move through this, if you do have any questions, please add those in, and we'll do our best to introduce those to you. So that's a little bit about me. So we're just going to share with you what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the challenges that everybody's facing. So whether that's coronavirus, attracting new customers, perhaps you might not be sure what you're going to be doing with your brand, or whether perhaps you need to reposition. So some of the topics that we're going to go through today is the state of the industry and what's happening at the moment, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the industry, upcoming industry trends that you can capitalize on, some strategies for success, ideas that you can implement, and of course your questions as well. So I'd like to introduce you to Scott. So Scott here works very closely with me. He has a background in working with a number of different hotel brands across the UK. Scott, thanks so much for joining us today.
No problem.
Okay, lovely. So Scott, you've spent the last sort of few weeks having a chat to different restaurant owners, hotel owners, as well as the operators and managers, looking, trying to understand what's happening. So what's the general mood of the industry at the moment?
Okay, so over the last couple of weeks, I've spoken to a number of hotels and restaurants up and down the country. My background is predominantly in hotels, and I've worked in the industry for over 20 years. So I can really empathise with the challenges that hotels and venues and restaurants are really facing at the moment. And I think that the one thing that was really echoed across the whole of the industry is the uncertainty. The challenges around reopening. How does reopening look? Are they able to open the hotel fully, or do they have to manage under certain occupancy levels? What does opening look like when they do, and also when there's a strategy there ready to roll out, but it's being held back further and further and being changed, and that everything that they're trying to do is kind of just being held. So it is very difficult for people, and I really empathise with them, and it's a really difficult time for the hospitality industry.
It's certainly frustrating, and whilst this is an ongoing situation, I really don't think that the UK government has done the best job in how it's communicated with the hospitality sector. Obviously, we're very pleased to hear that they're going to be bringing in a hospitality minister finally, who will hopefully be able to solve some of the challenges. So, we understand that there's a lot of uncertainty, frustration. It's really not good for anybody's mental health. Now, what would you say are the biggest challenges that owners and operators are seeing at this moment in time?
I would say it's operational issues, again, down to when they can open, when they and how they can open. It's down to procurement as well, so in terms of where they can buy their things in, produce in from, because that can't just happen overnight. There has to be a plan in place for them to be able to do that. And a lot of the government announcements have been kind of very last minute, so people are having to be very cautious and how they do how they go about reopening. Other issues are down with hiring and retaining staff. Obviously, a lot of team members have either been made redundant or they're at home on furlough. And again, a number of hotels that I've spoken to where teams are working from home and they're kind of having to manage from a work from home environment. It's really hard to kind of keep teams motivated at a time when people are kind of very cautious of, will I have a job? And
it's a big adjustment as well. I mean, we've been we set up as a virtual agency back in 2004, so we're quite used to remote working and what have you, but it's a shock to the system, I think, to a lot of people when they're trying to create a space to work where they can be productive, and where they're not going to suffer loneliness or feeling disconnected, because in hospitality it's all about people, isn't it? So thank goodness that we've got digital channels like Zoom as well, where we can get together.
I think one of the other key trends as well is around marketing and dynamics. So a lot of hotels kind of understand that there's a staycation trend out there happening, but they're not really sure on how to kind of manage that trend or how they can do that through digital marketing and how they can really jump on the back of something that will actually help them come out of this positively.
Yeah, I mean, that leads me greatly into my next question. So, are operators, both the restaurants and the hotels, are they feeling optimistic about reopening, or is there still that sort of uncertainty?
I think it depends on which area that you're speaking to. So certain destinations will very much kind of have a really happy balance between leisure and business tourism. But if you go into a city like Manchester that really relies heavily on the corporate midweek business and the conference spend and the large conferences coming into that location to drive occupancy midweek, when that business goes, because obviously large meetings can't take place, it kind of that whole market segmentation disappears. So it's how hotels are having to try and find how they can fill that gap through the staycation trend and kind of really anchor into what the destination is about, what do people want to come and see when they go to those locations. Another kind of niche boutique hotels that have health and wellness sites attached to the hotels, they're doing quite well. They'll be doing quite well. They've got bookings coming in. But it's when you look at your top UK destinations where there's lots of attractions there to go and see, where people just want to escape, those locations will do very well midweek, but it's how locations, city centre locations, kind of work on that to enhance the overall guest experience.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Scott. So what we're now going to do, guys, is sort of really get into some of these trends, get into the figures. So thank you so much for joining me, Scott. That's been wonderful. Lovely. So let me just get back to where we were. So we're talking about, so here's some of the forecasts that we have now. HBS has put this together for the industry. So we can see that in terms of the hotels, we've got a lot of different pressures. So we're looking at possible recessions. We're certainly looking at the longer recovery for meetings and conferences. A lot of uncertainty regarding travel patterns. There's a lot of issues that people are facing. And of course, it is an uncertain time. So what we're trying to do today is just sort of bring a bit of clarity. Now, it's clear that COVID-19 has changed the buyer journey, as well as the way that customers, whether they're corporate or personal, whether they view purchasing and companies they purchase from. So recovery for the industry as a whole was initially predicted to be looking at a 4-year period. HVS are sort of looking at that, but they're sort of looking at it really being another sort of 6 years until we've got a full recovery. Now, there will be a slow recovery in corporate international travel and possibly, sort of a weak demand for business trips, meetings and events. So that means that the forecast is particularly bleak for places like London, for example, where the overall RevPAR is forecasted to fall significantly. Now, with a vaccine, it is expected to recover start recovering in 2021. But in the long term, it's unlikely that occupancy and the average daily rate and the revenue available will return to 2019 levels until at least sort of 2023. So amid so much uncertainty, it's imperative that hotels ready themselves and act swiftly to demonstrate their adaptability. So this is the time for hoteliers and restaurateurs to look at their business model, find ways to cut costs. Those who can shift their focus to new customers should be looking at that as well. So I think we've got a couple of questions coming in. So let me just have a little quick check there. Somebody's just asked if the presentation will be available for you after the event. So just quickly, yes, this will be available to everybody. We won't just give you the slides, we'll give you the proper handouts with all of the resources that we have. And you'll also be able to rewatch the webinar on our social media channels. So we'll make sure that that gets across to you. Okay, so talking a little bit more about how consumer trends have changed due to the pandemic. So recent research into the impact of COVID on consumer behaviour has revealed that nearly half of UK consumers have increased their use of online customer service during the pandemic. And of that number, more than 73% will rely more on digital options going forward. So this means things like WhatsApp for Business, Facebook Messenger, live chats on your website. We've always said that social is important, and people have for a number of years been using social media channels as a customer experience and customer service channel, but even more so with the huge rise of people that we've had now online that are now using it. So I'm sure that we've all got that friend who vowed never to be on Facebook and never to use online, who's probably now discovered the joys of e-commerce and all the benefits that that has. Now, the data from this report also suggests that consumers' adoption of digital customer experience tools will continue to increase next year. Nearly half of UK consumers expect to use more chatbots, virtual agents, and self-service throughout this. But despite the growth in digital adoption, customers still value human interaction, with 65% of Britons stating that friendly, helpful and knowledgeable agents are most important for a positive customer experience. And that was followed by fast and efficient service at 49% and regular communication at 42%. So while 86% of the respondents expect to be comfortable returning to physical stores and venues within the next 6 months, 83% of shoppers will continue to shop online as much or more than they have done in the last few months because of the pandemic. So for restaurants that are struggling, one way that you could look at adapting your business is perhaps by creating your own brands. People are really into sort of supporting their local communities. I think if anything, this pandemic's really highlighted just how important those local communities are. And, you know, for some people, they might not necessarily want a takeaway. So have a look at productizing your offerings. You know, Nando's have done this really well. And there are other different companies that we're now starting to see on supermarket shelves. But, you know, digital is a great platform. And if you've got your own e-commerce store, then that's a way that perhaps your restaurant perhaps can adapt. So social media apps, online games, streaming content and other content together have managed to take away the maximum share of the time that users are spending in the lockdown. So if your business is on social media, that's where your customers are right now. And there's a lot of different community groups popping up here and there. And this is a great way for you to get involved in the local community and really start seeing how you can serve them differently. And of course, you know, once you build up those emotional connections with your customers, you're going to have customers and brand ambassadors for life. And speaking of the groups, recently The Guardian in the UK published that Facebook has seen over 300 new local coronavirus groups being set up in the UK. And the combined membership is now more than 1 million people in these groups. So these are the places that people are going to sort of talk about their concerns and what's going on. And, you know, for hotels and restaurants, this is a good place to get ideas of what your local community needs and how you can serve them better, but also just maintaining those relationships. You know, whatever happens, don't put your business on pause because people will forget you. Now, in terms of the different age ranges, Gen Z is consuming more online content. So Gen Z will be sort of like your post-2000 kids, like mine. And they're the ones that were sort of almost born with a mobile phone in their hands. So whatever you're looking at doing now, these guys are sort of starting to turn 18, 20. They're starting to come into their spending power. So do have a look at the video content that you have. Whereas millennials, that's my age, so 1980 upwards, we're all about content across various different media types. So whether that's online video, normal television, or reading. So again, you know, have a look at your buyer personas, who's using your service. Are you making sure that your content is in a format that's actually going to help them? So continuing with some of the stats here and how technology has changed, what we're seeing is that 53% of consumers are downloading and using more apps to reduce interaction and contact with on-site staff. So this is really handy for the hospitality industry, particularly for hotels and restaurants, because a lot of people, especially the millennials and Gen Z, will be using their phones anyway for sort of taking their Instagram shots and what have you. But so it means that they're already going to, you're not going to have such a hard job convincing them to move to a sort of contactless interaction experience. Now, 48% of all smartphone users are actually happy to research, book, and plan their entire trip to a new destination using just a mobile device. So if your website and digital presence isn't optimized and responsive, and by responsive, I mean that it automatically resizes depending on if you're viewing on a desktop, a laptop, or what have you, it should resize for that. So, you know, if it isn't responsive, given how many people are using their smartphones, you're risking more than half of your potential customers not even seeing you. And of course, if they can't see you, they can't hear you, and then they won't book with you. So convenience as standard, what do I mean by this? So last year I was very happy to be invited back to be a contributor on the Restaurant Challenge, the Restaurant Talent Show for Catering Circle. And one of the questions asked of me is, do I think, you know, what do I think is going to change in society as a result of the pandemic? Well, I think the pandemic has brought table service to the UK. That's something that we never really had before, and a lot of people are getting used to that. But in addition to that, people are now really expecting restaurants to deliver. So if you're a restaurant, you're not thinking about delivery, you will miss out, because people, now that they found that this is convenient, they're not going to go back to that. So it means that people are getting used to using digital channels, but once the pandemic is over and they're in these set routines, they're going to expect to still be able to interact with you in the same manner and with the same ease. So by adopting sort of a contactless experience now, that is going to be, I hate the word, and I'm so sorry, this will be the only time I use this phrase in the whole thing, the new normal. But that will be normal. So these conveniences that people have had for restaurants delivering at home, offering breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I think we can expect that trend to continue. And another thing we should really be thinking about with the restaurant industry, with takeaways in particular, is how menus can be adapted to support people who are recovering from illnesses. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to mean that they're recovering from coronavirus. In the UK, we do have lots of high rates of high blood pressure, obesity, and diabetes. And these are all three things that coronavirus, once it gets into your system, that's where it causes real problems. So I think have a look at your local community. What can you do to adapt your menus to support people so that they're going to be healthier in the long term? Now, interestingly, a couple of years ago, I visited the Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi. And as we were there and I was talking to the team there, they were telling me that the number one reason for people going back into hospital once they've had an operation is actually malnutrition and people not understanding what they need to eat to be healthy when they come out. And I think given the pressure that the NHS is under, this is where restaurants and hotels that have got restaurants can really step up to try and look at creating menus that are going to help support these people with these issues. Maybe we can help together. Maybe we can help people stop going back into hospital and keeping them safe. So, of course, even once the pandemic has run its course, customer confidence is going to take time to rebuild. Now, 53% of people surveyed said that hotels must have clearly identified cleaning standards. So again, have a look at your signage, have a look at the content on your social channels and your website channels. Are you getting that across? Because this focus on hygiene and sanitation processes isn't going to go away. People want to know what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why you're doing it. And that includes everything from social distancing procedures, hand sanitizers, contactless check-in. And more recently, we've been reading news coming out of Australia where they've already got quarantine hotels over there, that they are getting concerned that the coronavirus is now aerosolized. So at the moment, the current guidelines state that we need to be 2 meters away from people because of the larger droplets of the viral load that come out when we speak or cough or laugh. Now, usually these will fall straight to the ground within that sort of 2 meter radius. Now, I don't want to frighten anyone, but I do think that you guys need to know this. In Australia and the CDC as well in the States, they're becoming increasingly concerned that smaller virus particles are staying in the air longer, which means that, even if you're not following the 2 meter rule and you've just walked, in an area, it could be hanging in the air. So I think now is definitely the time to start looking at your clean air systems and what you can do there, as well as your ventilation as well. One of the issues with coronavirus is that there's so much misinformation and misunderstanding about how it actually affects people. So I wanted to kind of touch on that briefly in terms of the virus. So I was on Twitter the other week and I read the most amazing thread that really explained to me how the vaccines work in a way that I could understand. And I want to share that with you. Now, everything that we mentioned today in the handouts that you'll get afterwards will have all the full references so that you can go and have a look at this for yourselves as well. But essentially, the way that coronavirus works is the virus itself has a protein spike, and it uses this protein spike to get into the human cells, and that's how it causes the infection. So what they've done with these vaccines is, instead of introducing sort of like a neutralized version of the virus, which was sort of like the traditional model, what Pfizer and these guys have done is they've created the protein. And that's what's in the vaccine. So the idea is that if your body knows how to fight against this protein, then that's going to stop coronavirus even infecting your cells. Now, what this means is it doesn't mean that you're going to be immune from coronavirus. And I think that's really, really important to get across. A vaccine does not mean that you are immune. The vaccines have been designed to prevent people from getting the really nasty side effects and being intubated and going into ICUs. You can still contract coronavirus, and there's evidence from the CDC to suggest that you can still pass that on. So social distancing isn't going to go away anytime soon. So that's something to have a think about. So have a look at your social distancing procedures, hand sanitizers, contactless, anything that you can do to really get across to people that you're empathetic and you're working to make them safe. That's what you want to have a look at. Now, dealing with all these changes hasn't been easy for anyone, and across the industry, you know, we've seen that this is affecting customer behaviour in store as well. You know, staff and customers alike are stressed out, frustrated, and in some cases very angry and devastated by what's happening. And as a knock-on effect, this has meant that there's now a number of behavioural challenges to address, both with customers and with staff. So this is a good time to have a look at the training and advice that you can give to your team. They need to understand how to handle different situations. Now, this might not be, I mean, unfortunately, we've seen lots of reports of, you know, poor teenage servers being shouted at or hit across the country with people not wanting to wear masks. And while de-escalation and dealing with difficult customers is definitely something that should be on your training agenda, you should also be having a look at how to sort of train your staff to be empathetic. You know, how do you deal with somebody that's maybe germophobic now, or somebody that's got social anxiety? So I think we really need to start looking at how we can empower the teams in hotels and restaurants to really up that level of care, because that's what our industry is all about. Now, the behavioural changes haven't just affected how people are making purchase decisions, they've also changed the focus of what they're looking for. And according to McKinsey's COVID-19 Global Customer Sentiment Survey, 75% of consumers have changed shopping behaviours because of the pandemic. Value, availability, and quality of ingredients or the products being used are the main drivers for its consumers trying a different brand, McKinsey authors said. So consumers intend to shift their spending largely to essentials, but when it comes to travel, a lot of people believe that their next trip is going to be one of the most important ones that they take. So price isn't really a factor there, but it's going to be focused on experience and the experience that you can give. Now, money has been tight and customers want value, but that doesn't mean that you should change your model to only offer budget options. You know, the frustration of lockdown is a desire to do something else. And so for some people, that may lead to what we call splurge spending, or the desire to treat yourself. Anyone that's seen Parks and Rec knows what I'm on about. Okay, so with a lot of people at home, we're seeing a huge increase in internet usage. Not only has the type of content that people are looking for changed, but there's also a wider audience of people searching in the first place. And when it comes to hospitality, people are looking for convenience and safety. So 80% of online shoppers will download a hotel app, which gives them check-in and check-out options and allows them to do this remotely. 73% of people said that they would be happy to download a room key app. 47% of people would order room service via an app. And 48% would order from the hotel restaurant. So now's a really good time to start looking at how this technology can help you increase some of your share, particularly for room service. I think we're going to see a big increase in room service as we move forwards. Okay, let me just a sec. I'm sorry, my computer's just like having a little bit of a hissy fit. Okay, lovely. Right, back on track now. So with travel still restricted and holidays not currently allowed by governmental guidelines, customers have got to plan ahead. So one of the biggest upcoming trends that we can expect to see in the UK and in fact in all countries will be the staycation. So that's the stay-at-home vacation. So these people are looking, again, they're looking for experiences, they're looking for a break. For a lot of us, there's going to be people that aren't going to be happy to travel outside of borders anyway. But I think we should really make the most of this because the UK's got some of the most fantastic places to visit all around the country. And in fact, 77% of people are more likely to book a UK break following the pandemic. And a further 19% said that even if they went on an international holiday, staycation would likely be on the cards too. So what you want to have a look at is, focus on activities and extras rather than just the room amenities. Make the most of your on-site restaurants. Obviously, try and keep up to date with the government guidelines and new laws. Obviously, we all know they don't really make it that easy. Have a look at different demographics, because all of a sudden you're going to have lots of different groups of travellers looking for staycations now. And it's really important to keep your marketing up through these times to keep people aware of what you're doing. Last year I was at a conference in Cyprus, and I was speaking to one of the speakers there from Google, and he was telling me that in the past they used to say, oh, you need like 8 to 10 touch points before somebody buys with your brand. Not in the internet age. He told me that if you are familiar with a company, then it's likely 10 to 20 touch points. And by touch point, that would be perhaps an email, a social media post that someone's seen, a visit to your website, any engagement with your brand. So 10 to 20 touch points if they're already familiar with you, to nudge that customer along to making a decision. But if they're unaware of your brand, then actually you're looking at 50 to 70 touch points. It's huge, but that's the nature of the internet. We've got so much out there. Consistency is key. So make sure that people are going to find you on the channels they're looking for you on. Okay. So Airbnb, they've not had a very good time this year. They've certainly lost some of their clients and listers, and this does represent a good opportunity, I feel, for the hotel industry, because there's so many amenities that the hotels can have and actually really control the cleanliness and the safety and the contactless as well. So I think that we'll see big gains, the hotels making big gains on Airbnb this year. Okay, so one of my favorite trends for this year is going to be dog-friendly holidays. And the reason for that is that a lot of pets have become really over-bonded in some cases with their owners during the lockdown. And for many people, they just now couldn't imagine going on holiday without their furry friend by their side. Now we spoke, so according to the dog-friendly travel company Pets Pajamas, which I love that name, how great is that? There's been an 80% increase in pup-friendly bookings for next year already. So people are willing to pay extra for a place to be pet-friendly. We should particularly be looking at service animals, but also I think we're going to see more emotional support animals. I do still want an emotional support peacock. One day I'll get one. And also, less people to deal with. People don't necessarily want to leave their animals in kennels anymore. So, have a look at if your property is actually in a situation where you could make that a bit more friendly. For a lot of people as well, we're sort of seeing trends in solo travel and people making their plans there. Now, this could be done on perhaps a staycation basis, but I think we also need to look at hyperlocal staycations as well. There's definitely been times over the lockdown where it's like, oh, bloody kids, I could just do with a night's peace. And I think that's going to be true for households up and down the country. So perhaps have a look at, putting on some options, give mum a break for the evening, or, dad's had enough, let him have a night of peace. So have a look at how you could position your offers for sort of solo travelers. And people are going to travel for different reasons as well. Some people are just going to want to have peace and quiet away from a rowdy house. Other people just want to get back to seeing their clients. But we're also going to be seeing more people looking for experiences, and of course the health and wellness sector as well. And when we're looking at health and wellness, we now need to start looking at what can we do to help people's mental health. And perhaps that could be by having sensory gardens, quiet areas. So again, we've got to look at how we can repurpose space to adapt to changing behaviours. Now, as you might expect, business travel has been really hard hit, and they expect really that this year there'll be a reduction of 43% in the business travel in the UK. And, unfortunately, it is looking like it's going to take some while to get back to those standards. So again, I think what we've really got to look at is a massive change in how people work. And we've been having a look at some of the trends of what's happening in the housing industry. And for the pandemic, a lot of people have now realized, hang on a minute, I can work from home. Why do I live here? So that I can commute to work. So I think over the next few years, we'll start seeing people move to more rural areas. And I think we're going to start seeing more sort of global hubs in very small villages and towns, as well as the cities. So I think, here's where hotels can really step up, because you've got meeting rooms, you've got conferences, and not everybody's going to want to work from home. So have a look at how you can adapt your offerings for the laptop lifestyle. Now, over in Dubai, that's huge. You go, I would love it over there, because I would just take my laptop in my bag and I'd go and pick a coffee shop or a hotel for the day, and that's where I'd go and work. And I used to go and work in different ones to get different experiences. So that's something that I feel that especially rural hotels should have a look at as well. If you've got good internet, then you've got an offering. So international travel is going to take a little bit longer, as we can expect, as well. We see a trend of getting out of the main cities. So we think that there's going to be a big boost in villa resorts, obviously anywhere that's in the countryside, and also different accommodation types. Now, obviously, we don't necessarily mean that you need to go and start building new rooms because funds are short, but perhaps look at maybe where you could perhaps do some glamping or add some lovely outside elements if you're lucky enough to have some good outside areas. I think the more outside events that we can do over the year, then the more successful the hotels will be. So in terms of groups, obviously, we're going to be seeing smaller group sizes just for the moment. But we're also seeing micro weddings where people just want a really beautiful wedding for like 5 people. So again, that's another area. And I think, if you're a boutique or you're in an area of outstanding natural beauty, again, that's something that you can look at. So the groups will be very different. But again, I think the more sort of niche you can be with your groups, the more unique you're offering, that's really what's going to drive people to make those decisions to come and spend their money with you. The hotel office is another thing to look at. So over the summer, we worked with a couple of different hotel chains over in the Middle East to help them create what we call the hotel office. So this is great for traveling consultants and business people, and even sort of some offices where you can't social distance properly. And essentially what these hotels have been doing is renting out a hotel room for the day. So you've got all the convenience of a private office with somewhere to lie down if you want to have a nap at lunchtime, fast internet, printing services at the desk, but also, at lunchtime, if you've got a treadmill on wheels, one of the chains we were working with, they would bring gym equipment down to their clients at lunchtime for them to work out, whether that was a treadmill or a bike. But it's also nice for them to order the room service. Now, again, that's where we really need to look at what we're offering on room service, because people that are going to be working at your hotels want brain food. So we need to have a look at what you can offer in terms of keeping people energized and productive throughout the day. So, look at different fish dishes, look at the dishes that have got B12 and those lovely brain ingredients. What can you do to really help people have a healthy, productive lifestyle? So I want to share some ideas with you of some really cool innovations that we've seen around. Now, I love this idea. Let me just find my notes so I can tell you exactly who this is from. But this was one of the, this is the Fairmont over in the States. And because they've not had such tight restrictions on some of the groups, they still want to make sure that people's personal space is looked after. And I just love this wristband idea of, it just means then it helps your customers avoid any awkward any awkward situations. It's going to make them feel happier. So I'd like to sort of see this in more places, because not everybody's going to be confident enough to speak up and say, hey, keep out of my personal space. I think this is a lovely idea from Fairmont. Okay, so next we are seeing vertical concerts. And again, I just think this is so cool. So what this hotel did here is, as you can see, everybody's on their balconies. So everybody's getting, they've got the ventilation. And the hotel actually had a concert in the middle. So if you do have a venue where you could perhaps do something, and it's obviously safe to do so, that's a really interesting way of using space differently. Now, unfortunately, this little badge the quality on this picture is not brilliant, I'm afraid, but I just love this idea. So as we can see, this hotel worker, she's got a badge with a smiley face, her smiley face on it. And I think that's a really lovely way of getting across to your guests that you're a smiley, happy person and that you're there to help them. This isn't going to cost a fortune for hotels to implement, or restaurants. But we know that from marketing, we know that people mirror smiles, and whilst you can see the crinkles in her eyes here, and we know that she's smiling behind that mask, I just love the badge idea, because again, it's just that little bit extra that really says to the customer, we're looking after you. So apps, again, as we've said, is going to be a big one to have a look at. So again, look at how you can really make more of what you're doing. So with your apps, yes, it's great to have your check-ins and FAQs on there, but perhaps start thinking about how you could use your apps to communicate more with your customers, perhaps as a customer service channel, or to give them tips as to where they want to visit. One of the hotels that we worked with in Florida had just been introducing Alexa for hotels and hospitality. And it was a really great system, because it meant that they were able to customize the restaurants that they recommended from the hotels and places to see. And it just, again, it gives you that lovely immersive experience. And it's something that I definitely recommend looking into, especially, with the staycation trend. It just means then that you can work with fantastic F&B partners and tourist locations, and really sort of boost those community bonds between everybody. Okay, and as I say, look at how you can repurpose your space. So we touched on it a couple of times. So yeah, have a look at picnic areas for local families, perhaps for co-working spaces or hot desks that solopreneurs and traveling consultants are going to use as well. And be kind. That's really one of the main things that we want to get across, is that how it's just been such a rotten time, hasn't it? But being kind goes a long way. And I think treating, sort of giving your staff skills in learning empathy and active listening is going to be really important. Right, I see a couple of people have raised their hands. Let me just grab that a second. Okay, so we'll go, yeah, the badge idea, Adrian and Tasneem, yes, absolutely agreed. Paul, yes, you will get a copy of the slides. It won't just be the slides though, it will be the full script and all the references as well, so it'll be the complete version, and we'll also make sure that you've got the video as well. Are we starting to see shows and events in your markets reschedule for later this year, Q3, Q4? So what we know at the moment is that, I think my husband told me just before we started that Boris has announced that the schools look to be going back on the 8th of March. I'm going to take that with a pinch of salt, because we all know what Boris is like. But in terms, so we've got to be sensible. I think listen to the scientists, have a look at what they're saying about events. Obviously, when the weather gets warmer and we're outside, we've got that ventilation. It's going to make it harder for the virus to transmit. Now, hopefully by that point at Q3, Q4, we'll start to see the vaccinations start to work. And what we want to start seeing is reducing the transmission of the virus. And once we start seeing that, we should start seeing smaller little pockets, which hopefully when they finally get their bloody get it together with test and trace, we'll be able to control these little outbreaks much more. So I think Q3, Q4, have a look at what you can do outside still. Now, whilst the current vaccines that they're rolling out do seem to treat the original virus and the UK variant, there is concerns that that protein spike I was telling you about, there is concerns that on the South African and the Brazilian version, that protein spike may have changed. So at this moment, I would say listen to the scientists, but don't make any big plans right now. Let's start seeing some of this data coming through from the vaccine rollouts. And hopefully we'll get some more information soon on if these variants have changed the protein spike. Okay, so where are we next? So local culture. Now, this is a picture of Clovelly in Devon. This is just around the corner from us. And I've always been a really big proponent of really getting into local cultures. As a kid, we didn't have a huge amount of money, and I realized very quickly that you could actually travel the world from your plate and experience cultures that way. So whenever I travel, I really like to get a taste of the area that I'm in. And I think really for a long time, yes, chains and franchises have their place, but you don't really get a feel for a place unless you go to the independents or where they're homemade, where the food's homemade and the ingredients are locally sourced. So I think we really need to look at how we can support those communities more and the local producers, particularly with Brexit and what's going on. Luckily, it seems that we're still getting most of our fresh fruit and veg in, but why not buy local? Really sort of create those forges with your local communities, but also look at ways that you can use local people to create unique experiences. So one of the hotels I'm working with last year, we recommended that they had sort of like a showcase of artists. So you had sort of social distancing outside in the evenings, craft cocktails made with local ingredients. And then it was a case of, right, here's a local acoustic singer. And of course, they're far enough away that the viral load's not going to be an issue. The following week, it was a case of, right, let's have a poet or a historian. These sorts of events are going to attract people in the local area, as well as people to the hotel as well. So again, it's looking at how you can repurpose. Now, in terms of sort of safety, this was an interesting statistic. So, 42% of people expect the hotels to replace the complimentary toiletries, whether they've been used or not. So, something to have a look at there. Again, perhaps you could put that sort of information into your website content or in your social posts or your FAQs. 53% of people still prefer to eat in hotel restaurants, which is good news. And 18% would prefer to use room service. So again, I think we're going to see a big increase in the types of room service that we're going to see. And really, we need to up the room service game. Nobody wants to eat burger and pizza all the time. So again, how can you upscale that? Can you do craft cocktails on the menu? Can you bring in, Granny's secret recipe or something like that? Just make it a bit more personal. Now, in terms of how to market your hotel through these different phrases, so in a complete lockdown, which we're sort of naming phase 1, this is a time to continue to generate brand awareness, because as we mentioned earlier, there's those touch points that you need to sort of build up in order to nudge people along to making that purchase decision. Focus on locals and drive-in markets. I mean, if your car park's big enough, then you could perhaps look at, converting that into a cinema for, weekends or what have you. Have a look at who's going to be flying in. I think this year we'll start seeing different air corridors opening up with other safe countries. And you want to look at capturing bookings within that 30 to 60 day look back window. So as lockdowns start to be released, this is where you want to really hone in on who your new audiences are going to be. And so have a look at the data that your website's been collecting, have a look at who's following you on social media. Can you identify perhaps new or different groups of customers on there? And make sure that you retarget these people that visit your website. So you can do this through Facebook retargeting or with Google. But again, it's just keeping your brand at the front of mind. So when they're ready to make that purchase decision, they will. And then phase 3, as the lockdowns come out, that's where you really want to start getting people who want to book now and start getting those times in. And then, of course, phase 4 is once we're all out of lockdown and we can adjust strategies moving on to, to change with the evolving travel demand. Now, for some companies, this is going to be a challenge. So we're seeing more agile mindsets from different hotels, ways of looking at outsourcing various aspects of their marketing. For some hotels, they need full support because they just don't have the expertise or the staff to do that. And for other hotels, it could be a way of, one of the services we offer is interim support, for example. So, if your staff are furloughed, but you still need to keep the marketing, we can help look after those channels for you until your team's ready to come back, at which point we can do a proper handover and a session to keep them up to date with what's going on with the trends. So very much like what we're talking about today, but obviously specific to your venue. Ventilation is going to be another key issue. So as I mentioned earlier, there is this possibility that it has become aerosolized. So pure air systems, more windows, that's going to be really important. In terms of hand sanitizers, see if you can just sort of notch that up a bit with a luxury feel. Pop some essential oils in there, or perhaps look at creating your own different brands. Plenty of people are going to be looking for that sort of pamper with the safety. And again, we're just looking at different ways that people could be seated. So here, for example, we've got the plastic panel. We've got the face masks and everything. So again, it's just really important to have safety first at the start. And it's really important to communicate this. I mean, especially with restaurants, unfortunately, we've seen so much backlash on social media in different groups. If somebody has an outbreak at a venue, some of the backlash these poor guys have been getting is awful. So again, this training and understanding how people might react is going to be really important for your staff's mental health as well as your own, and of course your guests. So yeah, group bookings, I think we're going to see much smaller groups. I think we also need to look at how we can support household bubbles as well, and different family bubbles. Now, weddings obviously can be a bit of a challenge, particularly in the UK, when they're putting limits on how much time and how many people you can have there. What they've been doing in the States is sort of having socially distanced tables for each individual family, but making sure that everybody stays seated. They're not allowed to go and switch seats. They've also used the bracelets for that too. Oh, excuse me, just one sec. Pardon me. So they've also used the bracelets to to identify which table that person's sat at, and it just makes it easier then for the staff to have a look at who's obeying the rules and who might need a bit of a talking to. Have a look as well at what you can do with your car park space. So for example, whenever I go to the Excel Centre in London, there's absolutely no way I'm going to pay them £25 to park there for the day. But there are a few hotels nearby that are registered with Ringo, where I can rent a space for as long as I need. So have a look at how you could perhaps offer additional parking spaces for shoppers, for walkers, or as I said earlier, look at how you could repurpose that space perhaps as a drive-in. All right, so that's the end of the presentation. So I'm just going to go and have a look and see what questions that we've got. So any other questions that you've got, please pop them in. I'll be happy to answer. Okay, so where is this data coming from? Lots of different sources. We only use verified sources where we can double check the data, because we know that disinformation is a really big problem right now. So a lot of this will come from direct from the sources like the World Health Organization, different doctors, different strategists, our own research. But as I mentioned, we will make sure that every single item that we've referenced will be in the handouts that you'll receive afterwards. and that will all be referenced. And we do encourage you to go and check these out for yourself. Okay, Carl says, I'm noticing guests are also preferring pre-arrival and communications such as confirmations, COVID precautions, amenities available. Yes, it's all part, as we look at the buyer journey now, we used to have, it used to be like you attract their attention, you convince them to come and stay, and then you sort of nudge them into paying. So as part of that consideration area now, this is where it's really important to give them those pre-arrival communications. So again, this is where you could do this through perhaps SMS. Obviously, it needs to make sure that it's opt-in. You want to make sure that your emails have all of that information. And again, when you're designing your emails, make sure that they're going to be responsive for mobile too. But anything like this, have a look at your website. Do you have this information on there? Is your navigation easy to use for people to find? Because if it's not, then that's going to frustrate people and they'll go somewhere else. So absolutely look at that pre-arrival communication. Okay, so Mark says, hi Dawn, my company offers a range of cost reducing services to businesses. We are unsurprisingly seeing an increasing number of inquiries from the hospitality and food and drink sectors. Have you seen any significant differences in strategy from the larger hotel restaurant chains compared with independents and smaller restaurants when seeking to reduce their costs? It's a difficult one to answer that because depending on your location, I mean, if you're in London, for example, it doesn't matter what sort of size hotel you are, the cities have really been hit hard. Whereas, here, for example, in the southwest, in Devon and Cornwall, we're expecting to see a huge amount of people coming through next year. But in terms of reducing their costs, I would say now's a good time to sort of take stock of the digital tools that you're using. Do you absolutely need everything that you're subscribed to? Have a look at outsourcing or getting supplemental help where you can. I mean, that might be, for example, in terms of reducing costs, I mean, digital marketing is a great way to reduce costs because it does tend to be cheaper than traditional marketing. And of course, you've got the analytics to see exactly how much it's costing to acquire new customers or the lifetime value or what have you. So now would be a good time to have a good assessment. I would look at mapping your entire buyer journey from how they originally hear about you to how they find you, how they interact, how they experience the brand and what they do in the follow-up afterwards. Have a look at that, see if there's any gaps in your operations there. So yeah, an audit at this stage would definitely be worth investing in. Kyle says, how's the extended stay market doing in the UK? Difficult to answer at the moment because of a lot of places being locked down. I'm going to have to get back to you on Carl once we've got a bit more information. And Leon asks, what steps can be taken in order to avoid redundancy as well as to maintain the morale of staff? So I suppose I can speak from personal experience, having a virtual team and having worked with a virtual team for 15 years. One of the things that's been really important for us is to have comms channels that are just fun for them as well. So, we've got Slack group that's set up for all of our team members. And we make sure that we've got channels for them to just have fun with as well. We also use that channel to sort of share industry news. So really, I think to look at how to avoid redundancy and to maintain morale, you need to look at your hiring processes, how you can upskill and retain the staff that you've got, because a lot of people, unfortunately, are there's going to be people that are going to be scared to come back. So have a look to see, how you can look after their safety, and, perhaps look at apps like Calm or Headspace. They've got some great different corporate programs. They also do smaller programs. That's really helpful as well, so that, you could give perhaps free mental health apps to some of your teams. So I'd perhaps have a look at some of those. But, just going to see what other questions we have. Okay, so Kyle, thank you so much for your question again on the extended stays. I will get back to you on that. I'll perhaps reach out to you directly once I've had a little bit more time to do some proper research for you. Okay, so how are we doing for time, guys? Wow, 1 minute away. I just want to say thank you very, very much to everybody that's joined me today. I hope that you found it useful. If you've got any questions, please drop me an email. My email is dawn@virtual-solutions.co.uk. You can find me on LinkedIn under Dawn Gribble. We will be continuing our webinar series. We're going to be doing next month where we're looking at the wedding trends, and we'll also be putting together something that's focused a little bit more on the Middle East, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks' time. But if anybody needs to have a chat about their strategy, I'm more than happy to offer a no obligation 30-minute chat. Let's have a virtual coffee. I don't believe in hard sales. I can either help you or not, but either way, I want you going away from that conversation having at least had some value. So I'm going to sign off, guys. Thank you so, so much for your time. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, we're here to serve. Thanks so much.